they're not raising the interest rates if they don't have to. Brent says, Derek, congratulations on Chicago Tribune. I've been thinking, it's clear to me governments follow Keynesian economics and will continue to print money in large sums every crisis. On the other end, I don't understand what would incentivize a government to deflate the currency. I know they will eventually do this by increasing interest rates, and appreciate any insights you may have to help round out my understanding. Well, thank you for your nice words to me, Brent, about the Chicago Tribune. Appreciate that. Keynesians, I agree that, if you talked about Keynesian, and John Maynard Keynes is not an economist. He was a political philosopher and mostly full of shit. Mostly he was a dumbass. And he's a political philosopher. He was never actually trained as an economist. And that makes sense because he doesn't really understand economics. But the politicians globbed onto his theories. And we're deeply entrenched in a Keynesian trap that has been going on for my entire lifetime. We've been moving that way for my entire lifetime. And it's just going to get worse. And why do the governments want to print money as well? They devalue their debt as well. If the U.S. has $20 trillion in debt and they print more money, then they have more money to pay down the debt. And you get where that gets into trouble if it's post World War I Germany. They devalued the Deutschmark so much because they had these reparations to pay back for damage that they did to other countries during the war. They lost the war. They were ordered to pay back a bunch of reparations. So then they just turned on the money printers and devalued the Deutschmark dramatically. And they paid back the debt on paper, but the paper wasn't worth anything anymore. And and that kind of led the way. I'm not a real historian, but I know quite a lot of factoids about history. And that led the way for World War II. Is you had a very dispirited people in Germany that the currency wasn't worth shit. A lot of things were in disarray there. They lost the war. They felt bad about that. Their economy was pretty fucked. But why do they print the money? It devalues the outstanding debts, and then it allows them to go create more debts, and more debts, and more debts. They're going to keep these interest rates low as long as possible. A guy named Paul Volcker was the Fed chairman back in the early 1980s, and he raised interest rates during the Reagan administration. He raised them high, something like 16, 17% at the peak. It might have been 14 point something, and the banks had to pay 16%, something like that, to get money because the Fed funds rate or whatever with the Fed funds rate was 14 point something. But it was in that neighborhood of 15% interest, and interest rates are going to stay low because if nobody has the political will to do that. President Reagan hated it at the time. It almost cost him his re-election. And then he got reelected, but really slowed down the economy for him, and a lot of people were pissed. There's no political will to do that. There's no Paul Volcker today. The current Fed chairperson, Jerome Powell, or any future one, I can't imagine they're going to have the integrity that Paul Volcker. Paul Volcker was a high-quality man. Paul Volcker actually loved the country and wanted the country to do well long term, and he's willing to be hated in the short term. To make that happen, to help slow down the runaway inflation that was happening through the late 70s. And, he did that well. But nobody has the will that Paul Volcker did at that time. So nobody's going to do that shit. And today, you have this, the national debt's out of control. It'll be $30 trillion soon enough. So if you go if you go raise interest rates, that's the rate that they pay on treasuries. So, the government treasuries are going to be much higher, and it means basically 100% of the tax money. If you raised interest rates to Paul Volcker level era, more than 100% of the taxes being collected would just be paying off the interest. So, you wouldn't have roads, you wouldn't have schools, you wouldn't have. It's politically untenable. They're not going to do that. Now, there's other consequences of not doing that is, that you just have more inflation, and, I hope I'm dead before the country collapses, but we'll see how it shakes out. But, good questions, Brett. Good questions, but they're not raising the interest rates if they don't have to. They'll do tiny increments. They'll try to signal that we're prepared we're going to raise it a quarter point, and we're prepared to do even more. But it's not going to be real, high interest rates of that would actually stop the inflation. You're going to have more inflation. And they just changed the consumer price index. So the numbers you see where they say that, there's 5% or 5.5% inflation, the inflation rates, I don't see how it's less than 10% right now. I don't see how it's less than 10%. But they tried to hide this. They play they play little shell games and tried to hide information in the consumer price index, take things out, put other things in, try to shuffle the deck so they can hide the inflation numbers, and a few other games they play like that. But I don't see that there's any political will to have high interest rates now. And that means that you're going to have higher inflation. And that means if you own cash, you're fucked. So that means that you got to take that cash and you have to buy assets that are going to do well and are going to hold their value relative to the inflation. So it's not something for you to be, to live in terror of. It's like, all right, just own some high quality real estate that keeps up with inflation plus provides a return on top of that. Own some high quality companies that, despite inflation, they're going to remain popular. Do you think regardless of the price of food, do you think it's going to remain popular for people to eat? Do you think regardless of the price of alcohol all these things come together. Your wages are going to go up too. With the dollar's worth less, your wages are going to go up too, by the way. So you have wage inflation as well. So, you're still going to go buy a bottle of wine or, a 6-pack of beer or some food. You're going to go shopping and, probably you guys are still going to buy clothes for your children. Someday, some of you have some little children. I don't worry about these things. You shouldn't worry about it too much either, but I hope that helped explain a little bit. And I agree with your comment that, that's the playbook. When there's a new crisis, a real or a fake crisis, so a sincere crisis or an imagined crisis, they're going to go print more money. They're going to, stimulus. That's the playbook forever until they ruin the country. If you are or on your way to be a millionaire or multimillionaire, probably going to want to spend time with my clients. Probably going to want to have a personal relationship with me so we can accelerate that process, get you living up to your maximum potential, earning your maximum wage. You're going to want to click that follow button. You're going to want to click that bell and get notifications. Tune in every Friday. Tune in every Monday. You're going to love what you see. I look forward to having you as a client in the future.